At our engagement party, my fiancée kissed her ex and called me insecure, so I walked out quietly. The florist had miscounted and sent twice as many white roses, so the hotel banquet room smelled like a greenhouse pretending to be a promise. Everywhere I looked, there were small versions of us, on the slideshow looping on a screen near the bar, in the framed photos our friends had arranged on a table by the door, even in the napkins, which someone had folded into little hearts as if we were the kind of couple who needed help making the shape. "Breathe, my best man," Marcus said, bumping my shoulder with his. "You're forgetting to do that thing lungs do." "I'm fine," I said, which was true if we were grading on a curve. Music hummed from ceiling speakers, the kind of playlist meant to keep conversations buoyant. Servers floated with trays like satellites. A cousin I hadn't seen in years hugged me and told me I looked exactly the same, which I hoped was a compliment. She, my fiancée, Claire, was orbiting from group to group, the magnet at the center of every laugh. She wore the dress she said she'd keep forever, a pale color that made her look like she'd been drawn in soft pencil and then colored in with care. Every few steps, someone caught her hands, told her a story about us she had forgotten, or I had. She radiated what nights like this require. It was convincing. The first sign something was off was minor. Our event planner, a woman with a clipboard and the posture of a matador, leaned in and told me the photographer couldn't locate Claire for the toast photos. "She slipped out for a second," she said, not panicked, just annoyed at the one piece that wouldn't stay on the board. "I'll find her." "Check the terrace," I said, because I knew where she went when air felt thin. The second sign was the way Marcus's eyes changed before I knew why. He was mid-sentence about the cake knife, who was holding what, when his gaze drifted over my shoulder and rearranged itself into a shape I recognized from emergency rooms and late-night calls. I turned without thinking. The terrace door was half open, leaking winter, and through it I could see the reflection in the glass before I could see the scene, two figures close enough to be one. The light from the room stretched across the tile and made a stage out of the empty space. Her hand was on his jacket lapel the way she used to hold the front of mine when she didn't want me to move away too fast. His head tilted at an angle that didn't look like a greeting. People always ask in stories like this, "Are you sure?" The answer is that your body knows before your brain files the paperwork. Every muscle went very quiet, like a dog hearing something only it can hear. I walked toward the door because I could do that. Walking is just leaning and catching yourself, and I had spent months learning to catch us. Their silhouettes became details. His hand at her waist. The familiar curve of her neck when she wanted to be kissed. The small, involuntary way her shoulders lifted. There are behaviors you can explain 100 ways, and then there are two that don't accept synonyms. This was the second kind. I stepped onto the terrace. Cold air bit the back of my throat. The hum of the party dulled to a blanket, like sound had been turned down for a scene that needed quiet. She opened her eyes and saw me first. In the second before she stepped back, there was something like recognition and something like calculation. "Hey," she said, as if I'd found her comparing centerpieces. "We were just kissing," I said, not to shame her but to keep us in the same language. He released her waist and smoothed the front of his jacket with a flat palm, as if to make time go backward across fabric. He wasn't a stranger. You don't forget someone you learned to be the opposite of. His name was Evan. Everyone had an Evan once. "It was nothing," she said, too quickly. "It was a joke. A congrats thing. Don't be dramatic." The word dramatic landed like a ruler on a desk. The kind of word that tells you how to feel before you've chosen how to feel. "I'm not," I said, because I wasn't. My heart was doing a slow, heavy thing, my voice was doing a calmer thing. They didn't match, but that wasn't new. Evan cleared his throat. "My bad, man." He said it the way people apologize for spilling water. "Give us a minute," she said to him over her shoulder. He went, grateful to be given a door that didn't require a spine. When we were alone, she folded her arms in that way that makes space for defensiveness to live inside the body. "You're reading into it," she said. "You've been tense all week. I knew you'd make it a thing." "Make what a thing?" I asked. I wasn't repeating out of stubbornness. I needed us to agree on the noun before we argued about the adjective. She gestured vaguely at the rectangle of night. "This. A kiss. From a person I used to know. At a party where everyone's staring at me." "It was," she searched for a softer word and found one that looked like an apology wearing a costume. It was silly. There's a script where the betrayed person demands names, dates, a catalogue of sins. There's another where they become a museum exhibit titled Man Losing Composure. I stood in the doorway of both and stepped into neither. What do you need from me right now? I asked. It wasn't magnanimous. It was triage. If she needed me to say the thing out loud so she could tell me I was overreacting, I could do that once, calmly, and leave. If she needed me to provide her the line that would make this become a story we could survive, I could listen. Either way, I was not going to become the spectacle. She blinked, wrong-footed. I need you to stop being insecure, she said, and there it was, the turn, small and precise, like a knife sliding between text and subtext. Do you know how exhausting it is to manage your moods? To worry that any look from anyone is going to make you spiral? This is our night. Can you not ruin it because you can't share a room with history? I thought about all the nights I had quietly moved furniture in my head so her past would have a place to sit without knocking items off the shelves. I thought about the way she once told me she loved how steady I was, how nothing got under my skin. It was always going to be something, either I was too calm to be romantic or too observant to be easy. I'm going to go, I said, and the words tasted like steel and mercy at the same time. Go where? She asked, incredulous. You're not seriously leaving our engagement party because I said hi. You didn't say hi, I said, not raising my voice. You kissed your ex on the terrace and called me insecure for noticing. She rolled her eyes in a way I had once found charming and now found precise. It was a joke, she said again. You're making me feel like a villain. I wanted to say, I'm not making you anything, I'm finally letting you be what you chose. Instead, I said, I'm not going to make a scene. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to step out. You can tell people I wasn't feeling well. You can't. She cut herself off and looked past me at the room behind the glass, friends, family, the life we had been curating like a gallery. If you walk out, you're going to make it worse. People will ask questions. They'll think whatever you tell them, I said. You're good at that. Something flashed across her face then, hurt, maybe, or understanding dressed as anger. You're cold, she said softly, more to herself than to me. I didn't think you could be cold. I'm trying very hard not to be, I said. That's why I'm leaving now. I stepped back into the room. Warmth engulfed me, heat, music, the chatter of people who still believed the slideshow. Marcus was at the edge of the crowd, scanning for me like he'd been doing math without a number he could trust. When our eyes met, he didn't ask. He just put his drink down and followed. Walk, he said. You look like a person negotiating with gravity. In the coat room, my jacket felt heavier than it had when I hung it an hour earlier. He helped me into it the way you help someone into a decision. You sure? He asked, the way a friend must. I'm sure of leaving quietly, I said. I'm sure of not performing this in front of people who came to toast a story that ended 20 minutes ago. He nodded. Where to? Home, I said, though the word had already changed shape. For now. We moved through the room like a current, out of hugs, around photos, past the cake that had our names written in icing as if the future were a handwriting exercise. I didn't look toward the terrace. I didn't look toward the microphone where the planner was approaching the stage to announce a toast that would not have both of us. I kept my eyes on the exit because sometimes love is the act of choosing the right horizon. In the lobby, the florist's extra roses had been arranged into a second display, as if abundance could close any gap. A server asked if we needed anything for the road. I wanted to say, a time machine. Instead, I said, no, thank you, and meant it. Outside, winter reminded me it still had a few nights left in it. Breath made little ghosts. Marcus hailed a ride and asked if he should come with me. Go back, I said. Keep it from becoming a show. Tell people I felt sick. He winced at the lie and nodded anyway. You want me to grab the ring? He asked, low. I looked down at my hand. The band felt heavier than the jacket had. I turned it once, not like a dramatic gesture, but like a person testing a dial. Not here, I said. Not like this. He squeezed my shoulder the way we do when words are too clumsy, then went back in through the revolving door to play bouncer for my dignity. In the car, the city passed in polished slices. I watched couples in windows lean toward each other and didn't assign them futures. My phone buzzed with messages that had already begun to bloom. Where are you? Toast in 5, everything okay? I put the phone face down and gave myself 1 full minute of nothing. Not analysis. Not narrative. Just air. At my apartment, ours, until an hour earlier, I stood in the doorway and listened to the silence like it might answer a question. The lights were off, the rooms were tidy, the mugs were clean in the rack because she liked to leave the sink empty before events. I sat at the edge of the bed and unlaced my shoes slowly, like moving gently might make time behave. The impulse to explode lived in me, small and eager, sweep photos into a box, yank dresses from hangers, leave a note that would singe. I let the impulse move through me and out, like a wave that knows the shore won't change because of it. Quiet, I kept reminding myself. Quiet is not weakness. Quiet is the clean line you draw so you can draft the next version on paper that isn't already scribbled on. I took out a suitcase and packed as if for a trip. 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, the toothbrush from the travel kit, the book on the nightstand. I left the framed photos where they were. I left the ring on. I wasn't going to deliver any artifacts into anyone's hand like a prop. Not tonight. On the kitchen counter, the place cards from the party sat in a neat stack. Mine had my name written in a script I paid a stranger to learn. I turned it over and wrote, in the small calm handwriting I reserve for lists, "We will speak tomorrow. Not tonight." I added nothing cruel, nothing that would make either of us regret the version we would be quoted as. I booked a hotel 2 blocks away, the kind of place that sells calm by the hour and soap by the promise. Before I left, I took a photo of the living room as it was, stack of mail, the sweater she had discarded over the back of a chair, the plant she remembered to water even on busy weeks. Not for nostalgia. For record. This was the before image. At the door, I hesitated. I had imagined this moment many times, for 100 flimsy reasons, a fight about dishes that became a fight about schedules that became a fight about attention. In those imaginings, I always reached for one last gesture, a speech, a plea, a perfectly balanced sentence that would make us both see the same map. But maps don't change mid-journey because you declare a new legend. I turned the lock and pulled the door until it clicked. In the hall, the carpet swallowed my steps. The elevator smelled like lemon and old conversations. My reflection in the metal panel looked like someone who had learned something today he could not unlearn. Outside, the sky had thinned into that color between evening and morning that cities assume when no one is looking straight up. I stood for a moment in the cold and let the quiet do its work. Then I walked toward the corner, hailed a cab, and gave the driver the name of the hotel without an apology, like a person relocating, not running. On the nightstand in the hotel room, the pen had the hotel's name printed in tiny letters. I took it, not because I needed a souvenir, but because I had decided something while I watched the city scroll past the car windows. I would not perform my pain for anyone. Not for the guests who would try to read my face tomorrow, not for her friends who would text for details, not for her, who would say I misunderstood a moment. Quiet wasn't retreat. It was the sound of me building walls in the right places and doors where I chose. When the room settled and the heat clicked on in a way that made the vents sound like a distant applause, I opened my notes app and wrote a title at the top of a blank page, Exit Plan. Under it, I made 3 lists. List 1, Logistics. Call the landlord. Separate accounts. Pause the caterer before deposits become cement. Collect documents. Change passwords. Redirect deliveries. Keep receipts. Photograph everything as it is. List 2, Conversations. Marcus tomorrow. Parents after. Her, on neutral ground, at noon, with terms. No late-night calls. No debates in doorways. No bargaining with words that used to make us soft. List 3, Myself. Move. Eat. Sleep. Do not scroll the past. Do not rehearse her arguments for her. Do not write a speech. Write steps. Steps are kinder. When I put the phone down, the room remained. The bed felt like a bed, not a metaphor. My heart remembered its work. Somewhere in the city, music kept playing for a party that still had that slideshow of us looping to the end and then starting over. Tomorrow they would notice I had not been in half the pictures. Tomorrow there would be stories. Tonight there was quiet. And in it, a steady, unfamiliar dignity I decided to keep. I woke before the alarm, the hotel room already shaped like a decision. Outside, the city was gray in that gentle way that makes you think you could start anything over if you began before traffic. I lay still and let the early light turn the ceiling into a quiet page. It would have been easy to start writing speeches in my head, to rehearse a courtroom where only one of us showed up. Instead, I counted my breathing until my pulse moved from my throat back to my chest. Coffee from the lobby tasted like a compromise, but it was hot and honest. I sat by the window with the cup in both hands and reviewed the lists I had made last night. Logistics first. I'm good at logistics. They are feelings in work clothes. I emailed the landlord to request a meeting that afternoon, change in household, need to discuss lease options. I cancelled the caterer's final tasting with a simple, plans shifted, we'll be in touch. I took photos of the apartment key, the ring, the stack of contracts on my phone, not because the images would matter to anyone else, but because documenting the present stops the past from gaslighting the future. My phone started its small, polite panic at 7:42. Marcus, I told the room you had a migraine. She looked stunned, then, composed. A beat later, I walked your parents out early. They're worried. Are you okay? I sent him a single line, at a hotel. Meeting her at noon. Thank you for running interference. He responded with a thumbs up and a heart, the two emojis you use when you're holding a friend upright with one arm and texting with the other. A few minutes after 8, my mother called. I let it ring twice, then answered. She has never been good with pauses, I gave her 2 on purpose. Sweetheart, she said, the word already swollen with questions. I'm here, I said. We heard you were unwell. That was how she'd been told to carry it, and she carried it carefully. Do you need me to bring you anything? Soup? Your father and I. I'm meeting Claire at noon, I said gently. We'll talk. I'll call you after. She took a breath I could see through the phone. All right. We're here. Whatever you decide. It was a generous sentence. It was also a reminder that decisions are things you have to stand next to and point to when other people ask what that is in your living room. At 9:15, the event planner texted, diplomacy in a gray bubble, so sorry you weren't feeling well last night. When you can, let's confirm next steps. She attached a photo of the top tier of the cake wrapped in plastic, like a time capsule. I typed, hold all vendors. We'll advise. It felt like speaking from a podium. At 9:43, Claire called. I let it go to voicemail. The transcript appeared, we need to talk. Noon? The Conservatory Cafe? Please. The please mattered. Not because it changed anything, but because manners keep even ugly things from slamming doors. I showered, shaved, dressed like a person going to a bank, not a battlefield. On my way out, I left the room key at the desk and realized I would prefer to never sleep there again, not because it held a bad memory, but because it had done its one job, given me a place to think that didn't smell like our couch. The Conservatory Cafe is all glass and plants and gentle acoustics. It is where people come to say hard things in beautiful rooms. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat at a two-top by the window. The place was full of other private mornings. She came in on time, coat buttoned to the same practical degree she chose for weather and emotions. For a heartbeat, there was an ache so familiar I could have recited it, the way my body recognized her posture from across a street, the way my mind reached for the shelf with our jokes on it. I let the ache be a passing car. Hi, she said. She didn't reach out, which I appreciated. She sat. We looked, for a moment, like any two people having coffee without a committee. Thank you for meeting me, I said. The calm in my voice surprised me like a light left on overnight. She nodded. Last night got away. I was overwhelmed. People were everywhere. Evan said something stupid and she paused, searching for a verb that would make it sound smaller. Reacted. You kissed him, I said, not to pin her to the floor, but to keep nouns from slipping into fog. She flinched at the bluntness, then rallied. Yes. And it meant nothing. It was nostalgia. Nerves. You know how you can be when you're tense. I thought you'd. She stopped again, then corrected midair. I didn't think you'd leave. A server appeared with water and the pretense of not hearing. We ordered coffees because that is what you do during negotiations, you put something between you and the table. I left, I said, so I wouldn't make it an exhibit. I didn't want to perform my anger for everyone who had put on suits for our story. Her eyes softened in a way that would have worked on me yesterday. "I'm sorry," she said, and I believed she was, in the way people are sorry they've been caught at the intersection of their impulses and their reputations. It was stupid. "Were you going to tell me," I asked, "if I hadn't seen?" She was honest enough to shrug. "Probably not. Not that moment. I would have found a version of it we could live with. And I would have had to live with your version," I said. "That's not fair," she said, reflexive. "It's accurate," I said, without heat. Our coffees arrived. We both held the cups to warm hands that had run out of useful gestures. She tried a new door. "We've planned a life," she said quietly. "A home. People made deposits. We can fix this. We can," she gestured to the greenhouse ceiling as if the glass could bend the day back toward us. "We can put it away and move forward." "I don't want to put away what you did so you don't have to look at it," I said. "I want to build a life where I don't have to watch the door." Silence, a real one, not a strategic pause, settled between us. Outside the glass, a child pressed both palms to a pane and looked at the koi pond, delighted that fish obey water. "For what it's worth," she said after a while, "I said those things because I panicked. I didn't know what to do with your face." "My face?" I asked, and then understood, she meant the quiet. She meant the way my calm did not give her the scene she could win. I almost apologized for the steadiness I had finally found. "I didn't." "What do you want?" she asked, "right now?" "Clarity," I said. "Mutual clarity." "About us?" "About me," I said. "I'm ending the engagement." The sentence arrived in my mouth crisp and without echo. It had been waiting behind my heart for 12 hours. She didn't cry. She doesn't, when she's losing. She straightened her posture and set the meeting on new rails. "You're serious?" "I am." Her eyes flashed. "Over a kiss?" "Over a kiss, a reflex, and a blame," I said. "Over what it made very clear about what we are under pressure." She set her jaw, the way she does when she's about to thread anger through a small needle. "What about the families? The deposits? The fact that everyone knows?" "We will return what can be returned," I said. "We will eat what can't. We will tell the truth without adjectives." She stared at me for a long time, as if memorizing something she would need for later. "I didn't think you had this in you," she said finally. "Neither did I said, echoing the line I'd given someone else in a different story of my life. "Until I needed to." We spent 40 minutes doing the work that comes after the sentence. The apartment, she would move to her sister's for now, I would handle the lease conversation, we would do a clean split of the security deposit later, the vendors, I would email the planner with a formal cancellation, she would notify her side, the gifts, we would return or donate them, the ring, I took it off and set it, gently, on the saucer under my coffee cup, the most neutral ground in the room. She reached for it and paused. "Do you want me to?" "It's yours," I said. "Keep it, sell it, melt it down into something you can stand to wear. I don't want it as a relic." She picked it up and didn't put it on. That felt right. When we were done, there was nothing left to say that wouldn't be about memory. We stood. The server arrived with the check at the exact moment humans prefer not to be observed. I paid. She said thank you out of habit. We walked to the door together and then, mercifully, in different directions. Outside, noon had become day in earnest. I called the landlord. He was kind in the way good landlords have learned to be, he'd seen worse dramas end in cheaper hallways. He offered options. I chose one. I called the planner and used the simplest sentences available. She took a breath, recovered, and slid into her professional empathy. "I'll handle notices," she said. "You'll get confirmations today." I walked the long way to the apartment, through streets that had nothing to do with us. At a crosswalk, a man tilted a piano onto a dolly with the focus of someone who understands weight and pivot points. I stood and watched because competence is a bomb. Upstairs, the place had a different temperature. I opened windows to let the room catch up with the air outside. I pulled out boxes and started with the easy things, my books, my tools, my sweaters. I didn't rummage through her drawers. I didn't hold up a dress and wonder what it meant. I wasn't auditioning for the worst version of myself. Marcus arrived with a rolling suitcase and 2 burritos the size of apologies. He didn't ask for a debrief. He set the food on the counter and pointed with his chin at the boxes. A to B, he said. No essays. We worked for an hour without commentary. When we took a break, I called my parents and told them the truth. I ended the engagement. We're okay. Please give me a little time before you call her. My mother cried the way a person does when they're relieved not to be lied to. My father said, proud of how you're handling it, and then pretended to be attracted to a sports score so I wouldn't hear the emotion he doesn't know where to put. By late afternoon, my side of the closet had become a measurement again instead of a metaphor. I packed a bag for a week and left the rest. I didn't need to leave like a thief. I needed to leave like a person who could come back for the rest after the temperature had changed. Just before sunset, I sent one last email, a message to our shared guest list account. I wrote, we're writing with difficult news, we've decided to end our engagement. We're grateful for your love and support. We will reach out about any logistics in the coming days. Please give us space as we navigate this with respect. I CC'd Claire. She didn't edit. That felt like a small, necessary mercy. When the sky finally softened into evening, I locked the door and walked to the corner. The florist's shop had its lights on, 2 employees inside trimming stems in the back like surgeons after visiting hours. I imagined the extra white roses being delivered to someone else's promise tomorrow. Good. Let abundance land where it's welcome. Back at the hotel, the desk clerk handed me the same room key without comment. I took the stairs 2 at a time, not because I was rushing, but because my legs wanted a different rhythm than yesterday's. In the room, I set down the bag and stood in the middle of the carpet until stillness felt earned. I thought about calling Claire to say one last, kinder thing. I didn't. Kindness was in the clarity. Anything more would be a garnish on a dish nobody needed to eat. I opened my notes and added a new list, aftercare. It had 6 items: call the therapist I'd seen once after my father's surgery and now realized I could use again, run in the morning, return the hotel pen, cook actual food in 2 days when I was back in my own kitchen, text 3 people I trust to be boring about this, schedule 1 unnecessary pleasure that had nothing to do with self-improvement. I put the phone down, lay back on the duvet, and stared at the ceiling until its texture looked like a map of terrain I didn't need to cross. Sleep came without an argument. In the morning, I would wake to fewer messages than I feared and more than I wanted. I would forward a document to HR to remove a dependent from my benefits. I would print a short list of vendors with small balances and put checks in envelopes because sometimes closure is stamped and mailed. I would return to the apartment with boxes and leave without ceremony. But for now, there was the quiet I had chosen, and inside it, a dignity that didn't need witnesses. The party had ended. The slideshow had stopped looping. The room with too much light had become a room with enough. The first week after the engagement ended felt like moving through a house where someone had rearranged all the furniture in the dark. I knew where everything was supposed to be, but my body kept reaching for light switches that weren't there anymore. There was no big collapse, no days spent in bed, no abandoned dishes stacking up in the sink. Instead, there was a quiet, methodical removal of her from the edges of my life. Her coat gone from the hallway. Her mug from the rack. Her voice absent from the end of the day when I'd usually hear a, "You're home." It was like learning to walk without a limp I hadn't realized I had. Marcus came by on Thursday night with Thai food and 2 beers, as if the solution to heartbreak was the same as the solution to hunger: keep your hands busy until the ache passes. She texted me, he said between bites, asking if I thought you were just making a point and might change your mind. What did you say? That you're not that kind of man. He was right. I'd decided my point was not a bargaining chip, it was the foundation of what came next. Work became a kind of refuge. I stayed late, not because I was avoiding home, but because my head felt sharp for the first time in months. The quiet dignity I'd chosen on the terrace had followed me into meetings. I spoke less, but when I did, people listened differently. My manager noticed. "You've been dialed in lately," she said after a presentation. "You ever thought about leading the client pitch next quarter?" It was the kind of opportunity I'd have hesitated over before, second-guessing myself, running the idea past Claire to gauge her reaction. This time, I said, yes, before I had time to wonder if I was ready. One Saturday morning, I opened the closet and realized half of it was empty. Instead of seeing loss, I saw space. I went out and bought clothes I actually liked, not just things that fit her idea of what I looked good in. No muted blues or safe grays. A leather jacket. a dark green sweater that caught the light. Shoes that didn't belong to anyone's version of me but my own. When I wore the jacket to work, people noticed. Not in a new man way, but in the way they notice when someone's energy has shifted, like a picture straightened on a wall. By week 3, I'd moved into a new apartment, a corner unit with sunlight in the mornings and a view of the street where people walked dogs at exactly 7:30 every day. The landlord handed me the keys with a smile and said, "Fresh start, huh?" I smiled back. Something like that. The first night there, I cooked dinner for myself, poured a glass of wine, and ate by the window. The silence was not empty. It was mine. Claire reached out once more in that first month. A short text, "Saw your post. You look good." She meant the photo Marcus had taken of me at a charity gala. I was in the leather jacket, talking to a small group, laughing. My posture had changed. I looked like a man standing on his own 2 feet, not leaning into someone else's frame. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. 2 months later, I closed the biggest client pitch our firm had landed in a year. It came with a bonus large enough to feel like a rebuke to the life I'd been living before. I booked a trip overseas, somewhere warm, somewhere with markets that stayed open past midnight and beaches that didn't care about your past. The night before I left, I sat in my new apartment, suitcase packed, and thought about the man who had stood on a cold terrace while his fiancée kissed her ex and called him insecure. He had been quiet then, but not small. That quiet had grown into something stronger than I expected. By the time my flight landed, the life I'd been building was no longer a recovery. It was just my life. And it fit. I wasn't waiting for her to see it. But I knew, eventually, she would. It happened 6 months after the night on the terrace. By then, I'd stopped counting days since the breakup. My apartment looked exactly how I wanted it, plants thriving by the windows, art I'd picked without compromise, books stacked in deliberate chaos. My work calendar was full, my evenings fuller. That night, I was at a networking gala for a nonprofit our firm sponsored. It was one of those events where the champagne flows like tap water and the lighting makes everyone look 10% more successful than they are. I was there to meet potential clients, but I'd learned something important in the months since the breakup. Sometimes the best business connections come when you're just enjoying yourself. I was mid-conversation with a pair of entrepreneurs when I saw her. Claire. She was across the room, wearing the kind of dress that announces itself without needing to raise its voice. For a second, I felt the old reflex, my body bracing for an emotional hit. But it didn't land. The air stayed level. She noticed me almost instantly. I could tell by the way her gaze paused mid-scan of the room. She excused herself from whoever she was talking to and began walking toward me. When she reached my circle, I finished the story I was telling, laughed with the group, and then turned to her. "Claire," I said, offering the kind of polite smile you give to an acquaintance, not an ex-fiancé. "It's been a while." "It has," she said, her tone light but her eyes searching. "You look different." "I feel different," I said simply. "I've been hearing about you," she continued. "Big projects. Traveling. That new apartment with the view?" I nodded. "It's been a good year." She hesitated, as if choosing her next sentence carefully. "You seem happy." "I am," I said. And it was the truth. Not performative. Not sharpened into a weapon. Just a fact. There was a pause, and I let it stretch. Not to be cruel, but because I didn't feel the need to rescue her from it anymore. "I've thought about that night," she said finally. "I wish I'd handled it differently." "I don't," I replied. She blinked at that, waiting for the jab that never came. "If it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have made the changes I did. So in a way, I owe it to you." She gave a small, uncertain smile. "Well. I guess that's something." Someone from my table called my name, waving me over. I glanced back at her. "It was good seeing you, Claire. Take care." And just like that, I turned and walked away, not with triumph in my chest, but with something better, peace. Later that night, as I stood on the balcony with a drink, watching the city glitter, I realized the moment hadn't been about her at all. It was about me standing in the same room as the past and realizing it no longer had a claim on me. She had finally seen me. And I didn't need her to. By the end of that year, the night on the terrace felt like something from a different lifetime. My days were too full to leave much space for old stories. Morning started with runs along the waterfront, afternoons with work that challenged me, and evenings with people who knew me for who I was now, not who I had been in her shadow. I'd taken more trips in 6 months than I had in the entire time we were together. Barcelona, Kyoto, Santorini. Each city left a mark, sunlight on my skin in places she'd never seen, conversations with strangers that turned into friendships, moments on quiet streets where I felt entirely unobserved and entirely free. My work had taken a sharp upward turn. The pitch I'd said yes to months earlier led to a string of contracts, and suddenly, I was being invited to speak at conferences and advise on projects I once would have thought were out of my league. I'd built a reputation, not loud, but solid. And somewhere in all of that, I stopped wondering if she was watching. It was a Sunday in late spring when our paths crossed one final time. I was at a charity art auction, invited by a friend whose work was being shown. The venue was bright and airy, the kind of place where sunlight turned the champagne glasses into prisms. I was leaning over a canvas, listening to the artist describe her process, when I heard my name. Claire stood a few feet away, smiling politely. She looked good, time had been kind, but there was something in her expression I couldn't place. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the quiet recognition that she was walking into a conversation she no longer controlled. "I heard about your promotion," she said after the usual small talk. "And the travel. Sounds like you've been thriving." "I have," I said, matching her tone but not her hesitation. "It's been a good chapter." She tilted her head, studying me the way people do when they're trying to reconcile the person in front of them with the one they remember. "You seem different. Lighter." I smiled, not unkindly. "That's because I am." The auctioneer called for bids, and people began drifting toward the stage. I excused myself with a handshake and walked away. Halfway across the room, I glanced back. She was still standing there, watching. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't revenge. It was simply the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd built something that no longer required her absence to survive, something that would keep growing whether she ever saw it or not. Later that evening, I took the long way home, the city glowing under streetlights. I thought about how endings often feel like collapse when you're inside them, but from the right distance, they look like beginnings in disguise. That night, I poured a glass of wine, stood by my window, and looked out at the skyline. No part of me wished things had gone differently. I had left quietly. I had rebuilt deliberately. And I had arrived, without ever needing to look back. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.